Um, and this is a question that both of you can answer, and I'm going to ask Nivedita. This is it's a good question. Nivedita, if you are there, unmute yourself, and can you ask your question on? Um, you have a comment on COVID-19.
We've come across a lot of pandemics in the past, but it appears that COVID-19 seems to be the most chaotic pandemic comparatively. Why is that so? Or say has gained a lot of attention?
So the question is, I mean, we've dealt this. India has dealt with the Spanish flu. We've dealt with HIV. We've dealt with dengue and tuberculosis, etc. But it appears that this seems to be very chaotic. I mean, in comparison, is that actually so? I mean, as the way the healthcare system has been managed, has it been very different now, or is it just as pervasive as it is, and therefore we see this chaos?
I think Shashwati can answer this question.
I really don't know the answer, but all I can say is 10 years later, we would have all learned to live with COVID.
But Shashwati, I had a question to you. Is the current situation borne out by the fact, in some measure, due to the fact that we've placed absolutely no emphasis on healthcare reform, access to medicine? I mean, it doesn't seem to have been part of our growth plans in the past. Is it something we've known about and just ignored, and suddenly we've been hit with this pandemic and it's a wake-up call? And how do we go forward? I mean, when you look at other countries, I mean, if you take the example of Cuba, which is such a poor country but with an excellent healthcare system, what are the lessons for us? I mean, how do we rationalize healthcare costs and in a country with our needs and expectations?
You know, this is a conversation that we've all been having continuously for the last several weeks. And I just wish we had invested and paid enough attention to our public healthcare system, because if you go back several years, maybe a decade or so, you know, post tsunami, we did not really have an epidemic of any kind. And you know, the bulk of our tsunami management actually came in from the public healthcare system, and they showed us that what it can do. And because in a situation like this, especially one that you are not expecting, the one that you can really call upon to come and help you out at the nth hour is the public healthcare system, because
Absolutely.
that's probably more accessible, it's cost effective, it's reasonably better distributed, you know. So it has a semblance of a balance between urban and rural. It can reach deep pockets, because this is a very complex and large country. And it's very, very clear by now that any kind of insurance driven healthcare system which
Absolutely.
limits access is not going to work. It's just
Absolutely.
not going to work. So, you know, we will have to rethink about how, I mean, look at the best countries in Europe. Healthcare is free. No one pays for it. You don't pay the insurance guy, you don't pay the doctor, the government takes care of it. You know, but in this country, we're not only not paying our doctors, we are even asking them to sacrifice money for some private fund or the other. You know, so I think we need to really take a relook at how we view our healthcare system, because it's a very critical element, and it is going to be, you know, it is going to be the missing link between today and tomorrow and the day after.
That's true.
Saraswati, we have a question, and you sort of alluded to this in your question to Augustus. One of our faculty members, Vinusha, has a question on the macroeconomy. Vinusha, can you ask your question, please?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so you spoke about this with Dr. Augustus as well. So with, like, for example, more than 75% of their employees to permanently work from home. Now, under such circumstances, there's a considerable correction in terms of the real estate prices, if you look at in the medium term. So, do you think it might, and further, there's a reduced appetite right now as well in terms of residential real estate. So, do you think it can be a major trigger for an economic slowdown in India? And as compared to economic slowdown in 2008 in US, how do you think this magnitude is related?
I think her question is that the US 2008 slowdown was again triggered by real estate. So are we really looking at that perhaps 4-5 months down the line, it really coming and bursting a bubble in India?
See, the real estate bubble is going to burst, whether it's for IT or not. It is going to burst simply because the migrant labor is not coming back in a hurry, right? So your construction activity is going to come to a complete halt.
Is that, I'm just going to sort of interject with a small comment there. I went to the police headquarters today to collect an interstate pass. And you're right. I mean, all the passes that are issued are one-way passes. So, so I think that's a very valid point. People are
in fact, Manu might bear me out on this. I think if we had done a better job of managing the migration and the migrant labor force, and we had a deeper understanding as to what's really driving our economy, we would have been in a better position today. Today, every single industry except quote unquote the knowledge sectors are going to suffer on account of this. I mean, you can open your factory tomorrow. Where's the workforce? You can open your MSME unit tomorrow. Who's going to come? And if you're going to say, I will recruit, what is the cost of recruitment? And why would you bear that cost of recruitment, training, and skilling if you don't know whether you have a revenue at the end of the day?
Absolutely.
So I think this entire question of whether IT and real estate prices, yes, they are related, but then they can be repurposed. You free up some space, that space will get repurposed. I think the real estate sector in India is probably one of the most imaginative and agile sectors we've had. So that's not going to be the problem. Is going to not be a supply side issue. It's going to be a demand side issue. And if you're going to try to meet it, you don't have the labor force to meet it with. Manu, I mean, is that a fair assessment?
I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Can I make a small interjection here? This is Augustus.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Please. Yeah, we didn't know you're still here. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was so interesting. I didn't leave. Well, if you go back to what I said, about envisioning the future and the duty of care. Now, why are the migrant labor going back and we aren't too sure whether they are coming back? Is because that employee assurance and the duty of care, which is a responsibility of an employer in this sector, is probably not clearly practiced. That is one observation. The other one, of course, is envisioning the future for situations like this. Of course, this is a very big one, but it's so important for organizations to think of this and how we are going to ride that storm. Okay, and I think in both these areas we are lacking, because of which the economy is going down. This is one of the factors, I would say, and therefore people come first. And the duty of care is so much more important to be there as a primary driver for us to sustain the business and the economy. Thank you.
But Augustus, I completely agree with you. The only caveat I would put in there is you have to first acknowledge that your people matter, right?
True.
So if you had an insight into the value that migrants were bringing to your economy, then perhaps you would have been a little more careful. I think we've slipped, and that's where we've slipped up.
Yeah, we have, because we've not put as much importance on human capital. And again, I'm not painting the entire industry with a different color, but this is very sector specific.
For me, this is really interesting in terms of raising the level of public discourse in our country, and particularly political discourse. From talking caste politics and communal politics, for once, the focus of the country is on healthcare, it's on economic policies, it's on migrant labor. These, I mean, we people are coming to terms with the fact that there are these huge issues that really are should be the reason why we vote for one political party or the other. And I'm sort of, in a way, this is hopefully going to be a change for the better in terms of the political tone and discourse. Saraswati, is that just wishful thinking, or in 6 months' time we're going to be back to the usual India-Pakistan games?
Well, it really depends on what's happening to the economy. If the economy picks up, hopefully we won't. But if it doesn't, then whether it's Pakistan or China, take your pick.
Madhu,
I just want to add one other small little dimension, which I think is something that we need to acknowledge here and now, which is a migration is not just about providing a labor force. One of the biggest contribution of labor migration, especially in a country like India, is the breakdown of socio-cultural barriers. And that makes communication, especially for students of journalism, please note, communication becomes 10 times more complex because you are no longer able to predict the audience that you are talking to. And that's going to be a challenge that all of you who are, we've been there, done that, and, you people who are just stepping out into the world of communication, that's going to be one of your biggest challenges. And my simple advice to you would be, those of you who are not comfortable in English and are comfortable in other languages, please be proud of that. Please hold on to that as a skill, as a talent. You will be needed, if not tomorrow, for sure day after tomorrow.